Hi, it's Steph, and today I'm going to share with you how I prune and fertilize my knockout roses to keep them blooming beautifully all season long. Knockout roses, a tough as nails, hardy, disease-resistant landscape shrub rose. Now, rose enthusiasts might not necessarily like the knockout rose because they're not considered a fancy variety. They don't really have a fragrance, but what they lack in fragrance and fanciness, they make up for in blooms, because the knockout rose will bloom prolifically for me from somewhere in mid-spring, so mid-May, all the way through my first frost at the end of October. And they just look stunning. I have the variety called Double Pink Knockout Rose, and I'm in a zone 6. And knockout roses are hardy in USDA growing zones 5 through 11, and all that you need to grow them successfully is a well-draining soil and full sun. And after that, you're off and running. Just give them a prune and a fertilizer once a year and they will bloom beautifully for you. Now, you don't even have to deadhead them. It's not required that you go in and deadhead them, which just means cutting off your spent blooms. So once there are blooms that are finished and they're starting to look old, you could go in and take them off. Now, I do it because I like to keep them looking tidy here in my front walkway, but it's not necessary. Outside of that, they're really disease resistant. I've never dealt with really any disease issues on them. And the only other thing that I do is spray them with deer repellent, because the deer like to come through and prune my roses for me once in a while. But other than that, these have been minimal effort. I've grown English roses before and they always give me quite some trouble, but not these knockouts. They always look beautiful. Here's what you're going to need to prune your knockout roses. I will show you your supplies, but as far as when you should prune them, it all depends. Generally, you want to prune roses in late winter or early spring when they start budding, but before they break dormancy. Now, mine are actually a little further along than I would like them to be because we've had a really wet March and I didn't have a chance to get out here and do what I needed to do. So it is now for the first week of April and we're going to go ahead and prune them. Ideally, you want to prune them when you can still see the structure of the rose bush so that you can easily trim out any dead wood, any crossing canes, or any really thin spindly branches. So that is what we're going to do. I'm going to get in close on the shrub and show you exactly what I mean. And I'm also going to show you what you need to get started. In case you're wondering what this cute little red shrub is here, this is a Proven Winners candy corn spirea. It is a dwarf spirea, staying only at about 2 to 3 feet tall and wide. And this is how beautiful it looks in really early spring. Has this red foliage, then it transitions to orange foliage before finally going a shade of yellow and chartreuse green. It is stunning. And then it'll bloom in June with these clusters of fuchsia or hot pink flowers. And the pollinators absolutely love it. And this goes until my first hard frost at the end of October. So it is a beautiful shrub for the landscape that stays relatively compact, but it's looking really vibrant and beautiful right now, so I thought that I would mention it. Here are the supplies you're going to need to complete your pruning job. A long sleeve shirt is really helpful because when you're working with rose bushes, they can be pretty prickly with their thorns, so this will prevent you from getting all scratched and poked. Preferably a shirt that's a little bit older that you don't care about because it might get snagged. This one here has been well loved, so it is perfect for the job. Also, a set of gloves. I typically use nitrile gloves in the garden because they're nice and thin, but for roses, I do want to use something that's a little bit thicker, again, because of the thorns, to protect my hands. So here I have some that are canvas with a suede palm, so these are going to be really great for the job. Some pruners, and I also like to keep a small spray bottle of isopropyl alcohol so that I can spray and disinfect my pruners between rose bushes. Now, when you are pruning your rose bush, you don't have to keep disinfecting your pruners between cuts, but once you move from one rose bush to the next, that is when you want to go ahead and disinfect your pruners so that you don't risk spreading disease from one rose bush to the other. And you also need some kind of trash can or a garden waste bag so that you can collect all your pruned off cuttings and clippings. And I like this Fisker's kangaroo bag because it's nice and lightweight and easy to dump out. And lastly, you'll need some fertilizer. I really like to use the Espoma Organic Rose Tone. I find that it's a great fertilizer. I use it on both my roses and my hydrangeas, but any kind of rose fertilizer. And that's it. So let's go ahead and get started. It would have been ideal to prune your rose when it's at this stage where you can just barely see the buds coming off of the stems here. And my rose is a little further ahead than I would like it to be, but it's fine because it's still just in the early stages of leafing out. I can still see the structure of the rose. And here's what you're going to prune off. Anything that is last year's growth, you're going to get rid of. You're also going to take off anything that is really thin. So for example, this branch here is really twiggy, so anything thinner than a pencil, you're going to go ahead and prune off. You're also going to look for anything that looks like dead wood. So for example, right here, you can see that these branches are old and the color is different. You can tell that these are old dead wood branches. You're going to prune those off. And you're also going to go ahead and prune any crossing branches. So you see here we have a branch that crosses the other. Now what happens is with the wind, these will rub on one another, and anytime that there's some rubbing, there's a chance to create a wound, and wounds are entry points for disease. So anything that crosses like this, you want to go ahead and prune one of them away. If you're wondering how much of your rose bush to prune off, you want to take off about 1/3 to 1/2 of the top growth. And that's what I'm going to do today. But let's say you have a rose bush that's gotten pretty lanky and misshapen. You can do what's called a rejuvenation prune, which means that you can cut the rose bush down to about 12 inches and it will do just that. It'll rejuvenate your rose bush. When I make my cuts, I just go right above a leaf node or a bud node right here, and I cut at an angle. And the reason I cut at an angle is if it rains, so that the water can slide right off my cut instead of it sitting if I had a straight cut. I know it's hard to tell how much I've cut off because the rose isn't leafed out yet, but I started up here and I'm currently down here about hip high. So I've taken about half of the top growth off. When you prune your rose bush, you're not just pruning it for aesthetics so that it looks nice. That's part of it, but you're also pruning it for the rose's health. So by pruning inside, you're increasing your airflow, which will prevent or help prevent disease from setting in. And here is one of the 4 knockout roses that I pruned. It is nice and cleaned up. I took out anything that was really spindly, thin growth, as well as dead wood, any crossing branches, and of course the dried blooms from last year. So it is all cleaned up. I left the nice thick stems, took them down by about a half, and they are ready to get going for the season. Here are the other knockout roses. This one I took off a stem that was kind of going into my gold mop cypress here. And then this one I also had to take back a couple of stems that were getting a bit close to my Japanese maple. And it doesn't look like much now, but these are going to fill out beautifully in just a few weeks. And here are the other 2. This one here, they look so much better. It's so satisfying to see these nice and tightly pruned and looking all cleaned up. Now that I'm done pruning all of my roses, I'm going to go in with my fertilizer. So I have here my Espoma Rose Tone, and I'm just going to sprinkle it along the base of my plant, just like this. And I'm going to scratch it in. And we're supposed to get rain in the next couple of days, so it'll help water this all in for me. And that's it. That's all there is to it. Here I have a grouping of some potted English roses. Now last season, these were in my flower bed and they were doing so badly that I actually had to dig them up and put them in these planters with some fresh compost. Now some of these roses are upwards of 5 years old and they're just still really spindly and kind of just unhealthy. In fact, you can see that this one here has all new foliage and it's already got some yellow leaf. So I'm trying to nurse these back to health in these planters where they're going to spend another season. I had overwintered them in my unheated shed and I just recently pulled them out. But they generally just give me a lot of trouble here in my garden. So English roses really put up a fight, but I don't have that trouble with knockout roses. With minimal effort, they look beautiful for me all season long. Here is the deer and rabbit repellent that I like to use in my garden. It's the Liquid Fence Deer and Rabbit. It works really well. You just spray it on. Now this does have to be reapplied about every 10 days or if you get heavy rain. So it is very effective as long as it is applied on a regular basis. Well, I hope this video was helpful to you in seeing how I maintain my knockout roses. Just a yearly pruning and a little bit of fertilizer, and they perform beautifully for me all season long. Thank you so much for spending your time with me, and I'll catch you in the next one. Thanks for watching this video. If you liked it, please hit the thumbs up button and please consider subscribing so you don't miss any of my future videos. And we'll see you soon.